Hello and welcome to the Your Financial Pharmacist Real Estate Investing Podcast, a show all about empowering pharmacists to achieve financial freedom through real estate investing. I'm Nate Hedrick, and each week, my co-host David Bright and I explore stories from pharmacists all over the country who are achieving their real estate goals while maintaining a meaningful career in pharmacy. Whether you're a first-time investor or a seasoned pro, we're here to provide education and inspiration about the world of real estate. Please note, this podcast is intended for educational purposes only and should not be considered financial or investment advice. Hey, David, how's it going?
Hey, good, thanks. How you doing, man?
I am quite well, sir. Thanks. We just got an awesome interview with Young, our first two-time guest. We brought back Young J. Park to talk all things real estate. And it was nice. Again, every time we talk to Young, I feel like I learn new stuff and I get fired up. He has a really great mentality about him.
Yeah, he's great to talk with and kind of in this calm but encouraging way. I agree with you. It feels like now I want to go do something, He's just a great guy.
Exactly. It didn't help that the weather was gorgeous in Hawaii while we're talking to him, and we're dealing with a cold snap here in Cleveland, Ohio. So
yeah, people that are only listening to this because this is audio only podcast, right? But yeah, we get the video on our end, and yeah, this is one. If you are also sitting in a cold house somewhere in the Midwest, not a good time to be video chatting with someone in Hawaii. That's for sure. So one of the other things that I really like that Young went into is that you just don't need a home run on every deal. I think that there's just one of the things I like about talking with him is there's just a lot of transparent honesty in there where he talks about the BRRRR method, the buy, rent, rehab, refinance, repeat process, where in that process, you're trying to make sure that at the end of that, you're not leaving a lot of money into that. You're buying discounted properties, and through a cash out refinance and by fixing the property up, you're increasing the value substantially so that you can do a cash out refi and get your money back. A lot of people kind of put that on the pedestal as that's what I want. And I love that Young talks about how that's great if you can get that, but you don't need a home run in every deal. And he talks about some great base hits that are just great investment options for him without maybe being the most stellar thing you've ever heard of, but just great encouraging stories about achievable wins.
Yeah, I think that's super important, especially when trying to get started. It feels like you have to be this uber successful person or else you're not doing anything right. And he just shows time and time again how that's not the case. And there's a really cool bit in there. We talk about meetups kind of toward the end of this podcast. And I just think it's awesome that he's sharing that experience with others and learning from others along the way. And it just overall really great time to walk through and learn more about what meetups can do for you in terms of networking and especially to start to get back out and seeing people in person again.
No, for sure. For sure. And I think that some of that in there, one of the things he kind of weaves into that discussion of meetups is even how just getting started in this. There's so many parts of the real estate investing process that can feel really intimidating, whether it's writing that first ever offer, or connecting with a realtor for the first time, or even trying to figure out what book am I going to read to start with, or something like that. Going to a meetup for a first time can feel really intimidating. But he has this great nugget at the end about being uncomfortable and how that can drive growth. Make sure you stick around for the final question that he answers because he knocks it out of the park.
Absolutely. All right. Well, we'll take you guys to the episode. I hope you enjoy. Hey, Young, welcome back to the show.
Hey, Nate. Thanks for having me back. How are you, David?
Hey, good. Thanks. How you doing, man?
I'm doing well. Nice weather today. I know we were talking about that earlier, so I'm sorry.
Yeah. Young, you've got high 70s in Hawaii, and I think it's an overnight low of 26 tonight here in Cleveland. So really excited about that.
Yeah, we're both scraping our cars in the morning while you're enjoying that. It's awesome. It's awesome. It's that time of year. Yeah.
Yeah.
What that tells me, David, is we need to start investing where we live and living somewhere else. I think that's the better play.
Yes. Young has that figured out. That's for sure.
Exactly. So yeah, Young, tell us, you've been busy since we last talked. We have a lot to go over. That's why we wanted to have you back on. Can you kind of give everybody an update on what's been going on?
Yeah, of course. So I think our last recording was July. And since then, I've actually purchased 3 properties. So the first one of the 3 I purchased was a property with a tenant in place. I found it on the MLS. And this was a cool one because I was able to purchase it at a discount by using all cash. And then I was able to increase the rent as soon as I closed on the property. And then what we did was do a quick cash out refinance on it by using delayed financing, which appraised higher than my original purchase price. So I was able to pull a good chunk of the money back out. And even though it was not a BRRR, I was able to still purchase it at a discount and increase cash flow with very little work put into it. Yeah. And besides that, and more recently, I've purchased 2 more properties that I also found on the MLS. So the first one is a 2-bedroom, 2-bath with an unfinished basement. This would be a value add play to make it a conforming 3-bedroom, 2-bath. It's in a nicer location with a higher ARV. And I'm actually in escrow with an end buyer for this one, while the buyer is trying to get it financed through a bank. And the last one is, it's a small 2-bedroom, 1-bath with a crawl space. There's no room for value add, but it's going to be a quick rehab that doesn't need much work to get it performing. And honestly, this ended up being a great opportunity for me because I was able to work with a new general contractor on a small project like this so that we can get a feeler for each other and then to see if we can work towards building a long-term relationship. And so far, I'm really pleased with the result.
So many good things for us to break down in there. If I'm going to pull out one thing right off the bat, it's that you found 3 deals on the MLS in a time where everybody is telling me that you have to go off market or you can't possibly find a deal. So talk to Young, living proof. You can absolutely still find deals on the MLS. And I think that's a really cool story.
Yeah. One other thing I want to pick out of there real fast, kind of going back to that first one, you had a deal where you bought it all cash and then you completed a delayed cash out refinance. I love that strategy. Can you explain the difference between that delayed cash out refinance and just a general refinance or cash out refinance?
Okay, I will try my best. I have to kind of brush up on my memory. So delayed financing, you can actually start this process as soon as you close on the property, actually. So it's in a way similar to the regular, quote unquote, regular traditional cash out refinance through Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac. But the caveat is that if you probably won't be able to get, there is a way to do this, and we're not going to go down that rabbit hole, but there's a way to put in your rehab into the escrow when you purchase it. But if you don't do that, you're not going to get the money back for the rehab that you've put into. So compared to a full BRRR, if you're just not going to get that full appraisal and getting that full cash out refinance back out. But the advantage is that if you're not really putting in any work into it or very little, like what I did, you're able to pull out that money and make it liquid much quicker than waiting 6 months and a day as if you were to do it with a traditional cash out refinance.
Yeah. And I think that's a big key there is those traditional cash out refinancers is that 6-month waiting period where you can't do that refinance until the 6 month passes. But with the delayed cash out refinance, there's some limits on how much you can pull out, like you mentioned. But if you're not putting a ton of cash into the property and you're not looking to make an enormous cash out, then you can still do these all cash purchases like you did, which helps you to be really competitive on MLS deals in this market, but then get that cash back out without having to wait that 6-month waiting period. So particularly when you can get that deal because of the cash, I think that can be a great strategy with just kind of conventional mortgage.
It is. Yeah. So you're leveraging your cash. It worked out well for me.
And something else that I really like there too is that trial of the new contractor. I was actually just speaking with a person today, a pharmacist today that's thinking about getting into investing, and they were trying to learn more about the real estate investing space. And one of their concerns was like, how do you learn this stuff? Like, how do you learn how to budget for a rehab and hire a contractor? And anyway, basically what it boiled down to, the advice that I gave was take it one step at a time, right? Don't jump in and say, can you rebuild this house for me? Like start with, let's do a small job, put in some flooring, put up some paint, and let's go from there. And that's exactly what it sounds like you're doing, right? You're trialing somebody new on at least a somewhat smaller job so that you can see how that person works out and then learn how to grow from there, it's a really cool example of what that actually looks like in practice.
Yeah, you nailed it there, Nate. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm doing because I've been burned by another contractor who did a very heavy rehab and it just did not turn out well. We had to separate. I don't know if we talked about it on the previous podcast, but that's what happened. And actually this guy that I'm using, this contractor, was a guy who kind of stepped in to complete that property. And now I'm working with him on a smaller one. And yeah, I think he has the capacity to do bigger rehabs, but we're just, again, building that relationship right now.
Something else important you just jogged my memory on too is that it does not have to go perfect every time, right? You had a bad situation, you separated out and figured it out since then. It does not have to be perfect right up front. I think a lot of people get stuck on it's either I can do nothing or I have to do everything perfect. And it doesn't always have to go that way. You can learn from your mistakes. There's grace in this process.
One of the things too, just from a definition standpoint, use the term general contractor, and I'm imagining that means someone is kind of supervising everything that's going on at that site. Is that what you're meaning there?
Yeah, again, I'm not too familiar with the specific definition, but general contractor, usually they are licensed by the state or the county, and they have years of experience where they are able to manage the full process of rehab. So they either have their knowledge of their own within their own crew to do all the work, or they can sub out to subcontractors, but still be able to manage the whole project.
Yeah, and I think that that's really a helpful strategy for investors that are trying to not be there all the time on site, either doing a lot of the work or supervising an enormous team, to just have one person, one general contractor that's a point person for everything going on. Presumably, you pay a premium for that because you have that one person kind of managing your project for you, but it makes it really manageable, particularly when you're at a distance. Because can you refresh everyone for a minute where you live versus where you invest?
So I live in Hawaii on Honolulu, Oahu, and I invest in the Kansas City market. Right now, specifically on the Missouri side. So I'm investing from out of state.
Yeah. And so with that approach, I think that general contractor model of having someone to be your boots on the ground and do all that for you is huge. But even for folks that live in the same town or could go by and do a lot of that work, that as busy pharmacists, that doesn't always fit with what we're doing and what we've got going on in our pharmacy world. So I think that makes a lot of sense. And I really like that strategy of taking on a more manageable project, a smaller project, to see if that's a fit with that general contractor. That's great.
Young, one of the things that's come up recently, at least, especially on a couple of past webinars, is running actual numbers and getting some practice on what those numbers can look like. Maybe you can take us through one of those deals since they're pretty recent and just, walk us through the actual numbers and what that looks like.
Sure. So I can share the one I recently purchased, and I'm actually taking this one down myself. So this is that smaller 2-bedroom, 1-bath with a crawl space. And this property was listed at $82,000. And after negotiations, I got it down to $72,100. And it is an interesting number. Yeah, I know. And there's a whole negotiation strategy behind this, but we won't get into this unless you guys really want to go down that rabbit hole. We can do that.
I'm sensing some never split the difference in there.
100%. You got it.
Oh, my man. That's like my favorite book. I love that.
I know. So yeah, I've been doing that, and we could talk more about that, if you want to. But just to, go down the numbers, this property is located very close to the Kansas City Chiefs and Royals stadiums. So I actually thought about even doing a short-term rental on it. So, however, based on my brief research and looking up on Airbnb and VRBO, there seem to be only a handful of properties that are getting consistent bookings. So I was a little bit hesitant, and the property management company that I reached out to, they didn't respond back in timely manner. So I just decided to stick with the long-term rental, which was my original plan. So the rehab on this property will be about $17,000. So the total all in would be around $89,000 to $90,000. And I'm estimating the ARV to be around $95,000 to $100,000. And the rent on this property would be about $850 to $950. Although, this is the holiday season in the Midwest, it's probably not going to get the highest rent. So I'm just sticking with a lower number, but it'll still cash flow, right? And again, this is not a home run type of a deal, but a base hit, which I'm 100% okay with. And one thing I want to point out about the BRRR is that it's not really considered failure just because you can't pull out all the money invested in the property. Like you guys mentioned earlier, people either don't do it at all or get 100% done perfectly. It's got to be somewhere in between. There are other things that you need to consider, like you're probably getting a discount and getting a bigger cash on cash return on the investment if you are doing a BRRRR and still not getting a full 100% of the money back out. And you're also rehabbing parts of or the whole property, so you know which items you can defer the capital expenditures or repairs further down the road. So you know which items are going to be good for a long time. So those are all the advantages of BRRRR that you don't see on your calculator.
Those are great points and a great example of what that can look like. And I love the idea of just, you don't need a home run every single time. You can get that great base hit and recycle a lot of that capital for the next deal. And you've got a cash flowing asset that's going to help you out for the next 30 years or longer, depending on how you want to play it. So that's awesome. I love that. I do want to push you a little bit on the negotiation because I think that's cool. And I think that in this market, I don't get a lot of opportunities to negotiate anymore. It's just a money fight. Whoever can throw the most money at the problem gets to win. But tell me a little bit about how did the negotiation go on that? How did you get someone to actually, be at the table with you?
Yeah. So again, I'm out of state. So everything is done through my awesome realtor, by the way. So first of all, I learned this strategy that we're going to talk about from the book called Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. And yeah, Nate's already aware of it. I hope, David is aware of that too. So, basically he's a former FBI terrorist negotiator, and he's just got a ton of experience and pearls that can be applied to any type of negotiations. And what I would normally do is, start with a lowball offer. And you can't just throw lowball offers on all of them. And some of the way I would approach is maybe you look for those properties that's been sitting on the market for at least 3 weeks or so. Okay. And they're just slowly cutting down on the price. If they're not getting, going under contract, that's probably overpriced in the first place. And they might start getting a little bit more antsy and more motivated to sell if they really need to sell. So going back to what I was saying earlier, I would place a quote unquote lowball offer as an anchor. And this is testing the seller's motivation. And you're weeding out a lot of prospects at this point. But if they are willing to negotiate, that's a win because they're willing to talk and we're up for negotiations. So they'll give maybe a little bit of a price reduction, but not quite at the price point that you want. So what I would do is just thank the seller for being very generous for coming down on their price. However, we just can't do the price that you're asking at. So my number might be slightly higher and kind of go back and forth. At one point, what I would do is throw out a really, really odd number. In this case, I threw out something like $72,100. And from seller's point of view, this sounds like your offer is really well thought out, well calculated, even though it's just a number. You didn't put that much effort into it. But from seller's point of view, they're thinking that, oh, wow, he really crunched the numbers and got down to nitty gritty numbers. And at this point, the sellers will either come down on their price or even match the price that you offered at the end. It's worked out for both of the two properties that I recently closed on, actually.
Something important in there too is that you have to have a real estate agent who's willing to be okay with that strategy, right? That you have to have them be confident in going in with a low ball and not feel like they're going to be unwilling to deliver that for some reason or uncomfortable delivering that. And so again, it just having a rock star agent and letting those principles be applied by them, that's huge. So you've got a great team, and that's something that we brought up last time that I think really helps.
Absolutely. You got to have a rock star agent like Nate and David.
I appreciate the shameless plug. I don't know. That sounds like some serious negotiation.
Really do, because it's, we're more needy than some other folks, possibly because we are investors. But if the realtors are able to work with us, they're literally, my realtor got 3 properties closed within the last 3-4 months with me. So that's a huge benefit for them, huge benefit for me. As long as they're willing to work with us, they're going to reap the benefits.
I need some more clients like you.
I think that shows that value of a team. Like we talk all the time about team in healthcare, just like team in real estate, how in this case, having that great realtor plus a buyer that has developed that mindset, developed those negotiation skills, developed all that, done all that prep work, that team of that great realtor and a well-prepared buyer can help to get good deals. In this case, it sounds like you were very successful with those 3 closed deals. You talked about those 2 that you're keeping, the cash out refinance, the smaller rehab, But then you also talked about this value add and an end buyer for that one. So that's a little bit of a different strategy there. Can you walk us through that one and what did you do with this kind of extra deal that you might not have had capacity for otherwise, but you were just extra successful with getting deals under contract?
Yeah, and I understand that, people can, in a way, be a little bit shocked. And I was like that myself. I was pretty shocked when I found out that both of my offers were accepted, I think, on the same day or maybe a day apart from each other. So, when I got the deals, I knew I wanted to offload one of the properties. Okay, so with both properties, I did get the inspections done and I got the bids for both properties. And based on these numbers, of course, we're trying to get more price reduction after we go under contract, which is very important. And from this point on, I knew I wanted to offload one of the properties. And there are several investors here in Hawaii who are looking to invest in a cash flowing market, and they are looking for deals to come their way. So what I've been doing is to just try to find these properties and get them at a steep discount, and then find end buyers who may be interested. I'm not really making much money doing this, but this sharpens my skills of analyzing and putting in offers and negotiating. And I'm also able to provide value to the people who are looking, but they may not have the time or the effort to find their own deals. So another point I want to make is when I'm making these offers, I'm making these offers as if I were to take down the deals myself. So, and if the deals make a lot of sense, I will take it down. If it's something that I maybe am not looking to take down myself, then I will see if anyone is interested. And there are usually buyers who are interested. So it's worked out so far.
Yeah, that sounds like, I think, that fear a lot of people have when they've been told that they should be making a lot of offers, right? The only way that you're going to get a house under contract is if you make a lot of offers. And then there are these situations you can run into where, like you're saying, either on the same day or a couple days apart, two offers get accepted out of nowhere. I don't know if you were offering many times and just continually striking out, and then suddenly two appeared out of nowhere. But that's almost like a good problem to have. But I think a lot of people are just kind of fearful of that in general. What are some other things that can help to bring down that fear at the offer stage, particularly if someone may not have other contacts to kind of pass off a deal to or something like that?
That's a good question. So you got to, I guess, kind of pick and choose, right? If you're not able to take both deals down yourself, if you don't have the network that you may be able to share the deals with, then just has to come down to, is it worth pursuing one or both properties or neither properties? So that kind of comes down to you. What is your criteria, and are you willing to take them on?
You actually had a deal recently like that where you decided to walk, right? I think I saw a post on Facebook on that where you actually were buying into this. You had accepted or had an accepted offer, started the due diligence process, but then walked away. And that can be tough, right? Like to be able to go in and say, never mind, this isn't a good fit for me. Can you tell us at least a little bit about that, or how you manage that to make sure that it's obviously didn't hinder you, but how do you do that? How do you pull that off?
Yeah, so I think some of that has to do with just doing your homework and doing the due diligence like you talked about. So that specific example, it was a deal that seemed way too good to be true, and it was. So my realtor...
Funny how those work out.
So my realtor brought me the deal telling me the seller was willing to give over 30% discount from the listing price. I had to do absolutely nothing to, get the price down that much. And the property had a Section 8 tenant in place. And at least from the photos, it looked to be in a very solid condition. Long story short, basically we found out there was an HOA with rental restrictions where the owner has to live in the property for the first 2 years before it can be turned into a rental property. So that was an easy no. And I'm pretty sure the previous buyer, if I remember correctly, looking on Zillow, like the date it was sold, I think it was within the past year. So they found out the hard way and just trying to sell it at a discount and just get rid of it. So kind of going back to, what we did with it. So we actually saw that there was an HOA fee associated with the property, and you can easily look this up on Zillow or Trulia. You can see if there's an HOA fee or not. So once we saw that, my awesome realtor added a line under the additional terms and conditions saying that the seller must provide the HOA rental rolls within 3 days of executing the contract. And eventually that really protected and allowed us to back out of the contract without losing our EMD, because the seller's agent actually did not provide the HOA restrictions or rules within the 3 days. And eventually we did find out, what we talked about earlier, there was an actual restriction from the HOA. So it wasn't going to be a good deal for me. But because we had that, I guess in a way disclaimer saying you have to provide this or else we can back out. We were able to back out without having any of our money put into it.
Yeah. And I think another one that can be like that too is not just those HOA rules, but, can I see a copy of the lease? Is the tenant paying? I think particularly right now in COVID times, there's concern that tenants may be there and not paying. And at least in my market, I've seen where that's another reason why an owner may be willing to sell a property really cheap, because they have a tenant in there. They can't get the tenant out. The tenant's not paying. It can be a problem there. Whereas without some of those things in the contract, without working with a great agent that knows to ask for those things, there's some unfortunate surprises that can pop out of that inspection period. So definitely need to have those pieces in there.
Yeah, and I think you guys hit all three things. I actually mentioned this on one of my Instagram posts. So the three big things for due diligence, you got to do the physical inspections, right? You just check the status of the roof, foundation, HVAC, plumbing, etc. You want to get legal issues or check on that. Check for HOA rules, liens on the property, title search, etc. And lastly, financial due diligence. If there's a tenant in place, you want to check their lease, rent rolls, repairs. And I would even go as far as speaking with the tenant, which I did on the first property that I shared. And that kind of gave me the go to pursue with the property and close on it.
Yeah, that speaking with the tenant is a great tip that I've heard before too. One of the things that I've found just in walking properties is even asking that tenant, so what are some things that the landlord has fixed lately or that the landlord still needs to fix? And that tenant will sometimes give you a long list of deferred maintenance items and make your inspection period really, really simple. Anything else you've learned from a tenant or how you've worked through those conversations?
Yeah, so I got this tip from my mentors, CJ and Jazz, because that's what they do. And this was really fruitful conversation because I got to speak directly with the tenant and just asking them, coming from the position of you wanting to help them, right? You want to provide a good place for them to live in. It's their home. So I asked, were there any things that kept getting, like you mentioned, are there things that, keeps coming back for repairs? Are there things that you want me to repair? And just having those discussions up front really, I think, kind of, it puts us at a good start from the get-go. And, this also, in a way, kind of puts them, brings up to a good conversation where it leads to, bringing up the rent, right? Because they were paying, way below under market rent. So me, just by providing these things that they want or need, we're able to, just kind of carry that conversation over with the property manager. I don't personally do it, but the property manager is able to have that conversation.
Absolutely. And I think those tips are great things that we all just kind of pick up along the way in different places. One of the ways that I've had a chance to learn a few of those things is even from just local real estate meetups. And I know one of the things you've been doing lately is getting much more into the networking side of things and even starting your own meetup. So can you back us up for a minute and talk about what is a real estate meetup? And why might an investor want to attend a meetup?
Yeah, basically a meetup is people gathering together and share information, right? That's what that is. There are different meetups, of course, but if we're talking about real estate investing meetup specifically, there are different types of meetups where it could be very broad in general, which is, kind of the approach that I take for the in-person meetup. There are, people with just various levels of experience, whether you have tons of experience, you're just getting started, you have, 5 to 10 properties, whatever it might be. We're just trying to get people together so that we can learn together and share contacts and see what value each person can bring to the other person and just be able to work together.
And you actually started your meetup, right? It's the one that you have locally. There wasn't one before that. And you're like, hey, look, I can do this. What prompted you to go that route? I think that's awesome.
I wouldn't say there weren't any other meetups. There are. Yes, I did start one recently, actually a couple months ago as an in-person meetup. So my good friend Brandon and I, we've been hosting a monthly Zoom meetup called the Westside Real Estate Meetup, and we host that monthly basis. And this has been going on for the past year, almost 2 years, pretty much since COVID started. And at one point, we were just getting very, very comfortable doing online meetups and not meeting people in person, or not as much. So that kind of prompted us to, hey, let's actually start, meeting people in person again. I know, some other states in the mainland, they were doing that way ahead of time, but Hawaii has pretty strict rules, so we kind of have to take it slowly, and we have limitations on how many people can gather, things like that. So, it was just nice being outside and get to talk about real estate, eat some snacks, and just share and just you shake their hands, have a fist bump or whatever you want to do. It was just nice doing that.
I know one thing, particularly for some of these live meetups, when we think about the typical pharmacist personality type, is a lot of pharmacists are a little more introverted. I mean, the thought of a meetup may not be the most exciting thing out there. So do you have any tips for pharmacists that may not feel super experienced, may not feel like they have a lot to share, but they're thinking about going to one of these? Like, how do you kind of come out of your shell a little bit and make that a good experience?
Trust me, I'm 100% introverted, so I struggle with this all the time. So you're not alone, pharmacists. After meetups or social gatherings, I'm just knocked out cold. But just for tips, if you're a pharmacist and brand new and you want to, start attending these meetups and you're not comfortable, right? So what I would suggest is maybe start with doing some basic research about real estate. Grab a book, watch some videos, whatever it might be, so that when you're actually attending a meetup, you can somewhat follow what the other person is talking about. And that's just to get started. You don't have to know everything, but at least know some terms, some vocabulary, because that'll take you a long way. Another thing might be maybe go with a friend, or your significant other who's interested in real estate. That way you at least have someone to fall back to, and you might feel much less awkward, at least in the beginning. And lastly, let people know that this is your very first meetup, and just be ready to learn. And I promise you, people actually get excited to see someone who's coming out to a meetup for the first time, because they've all gone through it at one point, right? They had to have gone through it to actually be there. And they know what it feels like to be at a meetup for the first time. So those with good intention, and most people are, they'll root for you and may even give you valuable information, or even offer their time. So I would suggest that you bring pen and paper and take notes and learn. If you hear a topic or vocabulary that you're not familiar with, write them down and look it up when you go home, so that next time you hear it again, you're able to follow along and have, just join that conversation. So those might be some of the tips that I would give for maybe newbies or people who haven't gone to meetups yet.
I love that. I think that's great, and a good use of their time instead of just kind of showing up and not knowing what to do. I think that's smart. Do you have any example? I know this comes up a lot when I hear people talk about meetups and going. Do you have any stories of when it's making one of those connections has helped you find a deal or help somebody else find a deal, anything like that?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, the deal that I have it under escrow right now was actually done because I was at a meetup, at a physical meetup. Yeah. So there was a buyer who was interested in purchasing more properties, but she was actually not able to get the financing, or she didn't have the cash to purchase it outright. So she needed to get it financed. And of course, my mentor, CJ, was there, and he was able to actually kind of bring us together and solve our problems. I had a deal that I wanted to offload. There was a buyer who wanted a property, but needed to get financing. So we kind of worked it out together in a kind of like a creative deal where I'm almost acting as a seller financing deal, while the end buyer is trying to get it financed through a bank. I'm, just charging a small holding fee in a way. And yeah, we're just able to work that out. And she's currently going through the bank trying to get a rehab loan, which is a very cool product. So, if she gets everything, approved, then she may have very little money out of pocket to, purchase and rehab the whole property.
Yeah, it's just a great way to show some of the connections and how that can lead to advantages for someone else, advantages for yourself. It's a win-win. I like that a lot.
Yeah, I know I've seen a lot of those same kind of win-win things happen when you get people in a room that are high energy like that and that are all after similar goals. I know I've met wholesalers and lenders and contractors in meetups like this, but even more than, and I guess in addition to some of those contacts, there's just this momentum in this energy in the room where I know what you mean as a fellow introvert about leaving and feeling exhausted, but also somehow leaving and feeling like, oh, okay, I can see what the next step is. I can see where this could go. So can you talk about how sometimes being around veterans in a room like that, veterans of real estate can help kind of propel you to next steps?
Sure. And I think there's a saying, something like, comparison is the thief of joy, right? So don't compare yourself to the other people who've been in the business for years or even decades ahead of you. It's only right that they know much more than you and you're just at a starting point. They should be your motivation. And it's just not fair to yourself, trying to compare yourself with others, other veterans like that. So instead, just again, be who you are. Don't try to act like someone you're not. Don't try to act like you're a know-it-all. If you don't have the knowledge, just let them know and be ready to learn and show enthusiasm. People in the industry, and if they are, good people with good intentions, they are going to want to teach you as long as you're, willing to learn and retain and study more and show progress to them, right? So, everyone has gone through what you're going through right now or what you're going to go through by showing up at these meetups. So yeah, they'll really appreciate when you're just coming prepared and just them seeing your progress. It's kind of like, you being a student or a resident on a rotation. If you show your preceptor that you're progressing along and learning and becoming better, they're more likely to be receptive and, teach you the ways or whatever it might be, or get you connected with the right people.
I love that. If I'm an investor and I'm a wannabe investor and I want to find a local meetup, what's a good way to track one down?
I think the easiest way to search is, just look up the upcoming meetups on BiggerPockets. That's one way. You can also check the app or a website called meetup.com. You could always find a bunch of real estate meetups. That's both in person and Zoom, actually. And I think lastly, you can still look up, check out your local RIAs, Real Estate Investment Association meetups. You can easily find these online. I believe it's a national organization and they have their local chapters. Maybe Nate and David, you guys might know more about that.
Yeah, it depends on your location, but you're right. There are a lot of real estate investor associations out there that have local chapters and national level support. So all great tips.
Very cool. I know one of the things that has been just kind of a running theme across this episode is so many ways for folks to get started. I know we have a lot of listeners that are in that thinking about getting started. I'd like to get started. I'm looking for that first property. How do I go from none to one? So I know we've done final infusion questions with you before, and so we don't want to end with the final infusion questions, but would you have any parting words to share that how would you help encourage someone to go from none to one, to get off the bench and get into the game?
Oh man, I was not ready for this question. I would say start by just taking one step at a time. It's literally, you're taking one step towards going to a meetup. That could be it. We just want you to go put yourself in a state where you're going to be uncomfortable, because I 100% believe that growth only comes from being uncomfortable. So right now, if you're just looking at yourself, you might be super comfortable with where you're at. We're pharmacists. We make good money. We can make living and, just live a comfortable life. But, maybe look further in the future. Maybe you have some goals that you wanted to do, like, maybe your passion project, just spending more time with your family, loved ones, help your parents financially, which is what I want to do, or, whatever that goal would be. if you really wanted to do that, do you think you can be able to do that by just working your W-2 9-to-5 for the next 30, 40 years? I don't know. I mean, that's maybe a question that you may have to answer. Might be a little bit too deep, but honestly, like if you know what your goals are, then you want to put yourself in that position where you're just uncomfortable, and that's okay because I know I'm gonna grow, and I know I'm gonna be a better person.
I love that. I think that's awesome. Young, again, reasons why we had you back on the show as our first repeat guest right there. Just awesome answers and awesome advice for our pharmacist community out there that's thinking about getting started in real estate investing. And again, just really appreciate you sharing your time with everybody. It's always a really wealth of knowledge. I appreciate it.
Hey, thank you so much for having me back again. It's always fun talking story with you guys. We'll meet soon.
Yeah, absolutely. David and I are going to come out to Hawaii. That's especially this time of year.
And I'll try to go there in the spring or fall.
Sounds great. Well, hey, thanks so much.
Yeah, don't come to Cleveland or Michigan until it's sunny and warm out.
Sounds good.
Thanks again, Young.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks for listening to the YFP Real Estate Investing Podcast. If you like what you heard on today's show, please leave us a review and subscribe to the show so you never miss an episode. If you have a question, know someone that would make a good guest, or want to connect with Nate or David, head on over to yfprealestate.com and join the growing YFP Real Estate Investing Facebook group. As we conclude this week's episode of the YFP Real Estate Investing Podcast, an important reminder that the content in this podcast is provided to you for your informational purposes only and is not intended to provide and should not be relied on for investment or any other advice. Information in the podcast and corresponding materials should not be construed as a solicitation or offer to buy or sell any investment or related financial products. We urge listeners to consult with a financial advisor with respect to any investment. Furthermore, the information contained in our archived newsletters, blog posts, and podcasts is not updated and may not be accurate at the time you listen to it on this podcast. Opinions and analyses expressed herein are solely those of your financial pharmacist, unless otherwise noted, and constitute judgments as of the dates published. Such information may contain forward-looking statements which are not intended to be guarantees of future events. Actual results could differ materially from those anticipated in the forward-looking statements. For more information, please visit yourfinancialpharmacist.com/.